Seraphine Laurent had learned to make herself disappear without actually going anywhere. She had been doing it for 12 years. Small movements, quiet shoes, eyes that never stayed too long on any one face. She worked at Ridgeholm Lodge, a sprawling stone building pressed against the northern mountains, where wealthy travelers came to rest and important men came to argue over maps. She scrubbed floors. She folded linens. She carried trays of food up narrow staircases and set them down without making a sound. The staff called her Sara. She had let them. The name Seraphine Laurent had not been spoken aloud in her presence since she was 17 years old, and she preferred it that way. Some names carried too much history. Some names opened doors that people had died trying to close. She was 30 years old now. Her hands were rough from work. Her hair was always pulled back, always practical, always forgettable. She owned 3 pairs of shoes and 1 good coat, which she kept folded at the bottom of a drawer because there was nowhere important enough to wear it. She had built her life the way a person builds a wall, brick by brick, gap by gap, until there was nothing on the other side that anyone could see. She was, by every measure she had chosen for herself, nobody. King Kalen Voss arrived on a Tuesday morning without warning. His vehicles filled the entire courtyard. His security team moved through the lodge before he even stepped inside, checking corners and stairwells with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this 100 times. The lodge manager, a nervous man named Gregor, stood at the front entrance, wiping his hands on his jacket and trying to smile in a way that looked natural. It did not look natural. Seraphine was mopping the far end of the main corridor when the king walked in. She did not stop mopping. She did not look up. She kept her eyes on the floor and moved the mop in steady, even strokes, and she listened to the sound of expensive boots on stone and the low murmur of advisors explaining things to a man who had probably already read everything they were explaining. Kalen Voss was 28 years old and had been ruling the northern wolf territories since he was 22, when his father died and left him a throne and 3 ongoing border disputes as a kind of inheritance. He had resolved 2 of them. The third had brought him to Ridgeholm Lodge, which sat directly on the contested land and had, therefore, become relevant. He passed within 4 feet of Seraphine without looking at her. She breathed again when he was gone. The trouble began the next morning. Kalen's lead advisor, a tall man named Rector, was presenting the territorial charter to a small group in the eastern sitting room. Seraphine was there to collect the empty coffee cups. She was not supposed to be listening. She was not supposed to care. But Rector read the 3rd clause wrong. It was a small error, a single word substituted for another, which shifted the meaning of the entire boundary provision by approximately 11 kilometers and several million in land value. No one in the room caught it. They were nodding along, and Rector was moving to the next page, and Seraphine stood there with a tray of empty cups and thought, very clearly, that is not what that sentence says. She should have left. She had been telling herself to leave situations like this for 12 years, and she was very good at it, and she did not do it. "Excuse me," she said. Every head in the room turned. She kept her voice even. The 3rd clause uses the word adjacent, not bordering. The distinction was deliberate. The original drafters meant it to exclude the river corridor. If you read it as bordering, the entire southern boundary shifts. Silence. Rector looked at the page. He looked at it for a long time. "She is correct," said a quiet voice from the doorway. Seraphine turned. Kalen Voss was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, and an expression on his face that she could not immediately name. He was looking at her the way people look at something they almost walked past without noticing. She picked up the tray and left the room. That evening, she told herself it had been a small thing, forgettable. She had said 7 words and corrected a document and walked away. There was no reason for anyone to think more about it. She almost believed herself. Kalen began to watch her. Not in any way she could object to, not in any way she could name and point at and say, "This is a problem." He simply began to appear in rooms that she was also in. He asked Gregor about staffing. He walked the corridors in the evenings, which men like him did not usually do. Men like him had people to walk corridors for them. And twice, Seraphine turned a corner and found him there. And both times, he nodded at her like she was a person he expected to see. She found this deeply unsettling. She had spent 12 years becoming invisible, and this man looked at her like she was the opposite of invisible, like she was the only thing in a room that was exactly where it was supposed to be. His wolf noticed her. She could feel it, that particular stillness that came over a powerful shifter when something registered below the surface of ordinary thought. She had grown up around wolves who carried authority in their bones, and she knew what recognition felt like, even when the person doing the recognizing did not yet understand what they were recognizing. She started choosing different corridors. He started appearing in those too. On the 5th day, a delegation arrived from the Eastern Court. There were 8 of them, representatives from a house that had been in political negotiations with Kaelin's advisors for the past 3 months. They came in through the main entrance at midday, and Seraphine was crossing the lobby with an armful of fresh towels, and one of the delegates, a small, older man with white hair and very careful eyes, stopped walking entirely when he saw her. The color left his face. Seraphine recognized him. She had been 11 years old the last time she saw him, and he had been younger, and his hair had been dark, but she recognized the shape of his face and the particular way he held himself, slightly tilted to the left, as though apologizing for taking up space. His name was Aldrich. He had been a court official in the Auryn palace for 20 years. He opened his mouth. She shook her head. A tiny movement. Almost nothing. He closed his mouth. She walked past him and up the stairs and into a linen closet and stood there in the dark for 2 full minutes, with her back against the shelves and the towels pressed against her chest, and her breathing very careful and very controlled. Then she put the towels away and went back to work. That night she packed a bag. She sat on the edge of her bed and looked at the bag for a long time. Then she unpacked it. She did not fully understand why. She told herself it was practical. Leaving in the middle of the night would raise more questions than staying. She told herself she had nowhere specific to go. She told herself a lot of things, and underneath all of them, unexamined, was the fact that for the first time in 12 years, she had stopped wanting to disappear. She found this more frightening than anything else. Eldrick spoke anyway. Not to her. She had known he would not come to her directly. He had always been a man who worked through other people, a quality she had once found frustrating, and now recognized as exactly the kind of thing that gets information to exactly the wrong people. He spoke to someone in the Eastern delegation, who mentioned something to someone in Kaelin's staff, who passed it along to the head of intelligence as a curiosity, a rumor, something probably worth looking into. The Bloodline records were sealed. She had made sure of that, years ago, through channels that had cost her everything she had at the time. But sealed was not the same as gone. Sealed meant someone had to go looking on purpose, and someone did. The record landed on Kaelin's desk 11 days after he arrived. He read it at midnight, alone in the room they had given him for an office. He read it once, and then he read it again, and then he set it down and sat very still for a while, the way a person sits when their understanding of a situation has just shifted under them like ground that was never as solid as they thought. The record was a single page. It carried a name, a bloodline designation, and a date. The name was Seraphine Laurent. The designation was First Blood, the Auryn line, which was the oldest royal lineage in the history of the northern wolf packs, predating every current claim to power by 4 generations. The date was her birthday. She was 3 minutes from the back gate when he found her. She had 1 boot on. She was sitting on the low stone wall behind the kitchen garden, pulling on the second one, when she heard his footsteps, and she knew immediately whose they were, because she had spent 11 days memorizing the sound of them without meaning to. His hand closed around her wrist. Not hard, not demanding, just present, in the way that very certain people are present, without needing to perform certainty. She looked up at him. He looked back at her. The mountain air was cold, and the sky was the particular dark blue that comes just before dawn, and they stayed like that for a long moment, while neither of them said anything. Then he said, "You could have told me." She stared at him. She thought about what to say. She thought about 12 years of careful silence, and the weight of a name she had not spoken out loud, and the burning door she had seen through as a child, and the 3 rival families who had been waiting, for all of those 12 years, for someone exactly like her to surface. "You could have told me," she said slowly. is the most naive sentence I have ever heard from a man with a throne. He did not look away. He did not get angry. He simply absorbed the sentence the way he absorbed most things she said to him, completely, without argument, as though he was filing it somewhere important. He let go of her wrist. She did not run. Saltuous. Within 2 days of the record surfacing, 3 things happened. A bounty was placed on her location through channels that were meant to be untraceable, and were not quite untraceable enough. 2 rival faction representatives arrived at the lodge under the cover of the ongoing territorial negotiations. Except they had no real interest in the territorial negotiations. One of them got as far as the 2nd floor before Kaylin's security found him. The obscurity she had lived inside for 12 years had not been poverty. It had been armor. She understood this now with a clarity that came too late to be useful, and too sharp to be anything but painful. Kaylin moved her under his protection without ceremony, and without titles, and without asking her to perform anything for his court. He did not announce what she was. He did not make speeches. He simply reorganized the security of the building around her presence, the same way he would reorganize anything, efficiently, without drama, with the absolute certainty of a man who had already decided, and was not interested in discussing it. His advisors used the word reckless in meetings they thought he could not hear. He signed the protection orders anyway. The real secret surfaced on the 14th day. She had not been the one to hide it. It had been hidden long before her, by people who understood what it meant better than she did as a child, and had decided, in their wisdom, to protect her from it, by never fully explaining it. The binding compact was older than any of the current pacts. It was a document written in the earliest years of the Northern Wolf territories, a covenant between the Auryn bloodline and the founding pacts that established something very simple and very enormous. Whoever the last Auryn heir acknowledged as a true and equal partner would hold legitimate authority over all the northern territories. And whoever they refused, whatever claim existed before that refusal, would dissolve. She could make a king. She could unmake one. She had known something like this existed since she was 9 years old. She had not known its precise terms. She had known it was why her family burned. She had known it was why 3 families had been looking for her, with varying degrees of patience, for 12 years. She had not known the exact shape of the thing they wanted. Now she did. The document surfaced because someone made sure it would. It was placed in front of Kaylin's full council on a Wednesday morning, and Seraphine was not in the room, and Kaylin read it without moving his face, and then he set it down on the table in the exact careful way he had set down the Bloodline record 2 weeks before. He asked the council, in a very quiet voice, if anyone in the room had shared information about her location before he had been briefed. 2 people could not meet his eyes. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He found her that evening, at the window, at the end of the east corridor. She went there sometimes in the late afternoon, because the light came through, at an angle, that reminded her of a window in her childhood home, before there was no home. She stood there the same way she had stood there as a girl, hands at her sides, watching the mountains hold the last of the day's light. She heard him stop in the doorway. He was quiet for a long time. She did not turn around. She already knew what was on his face, because she had been watching him process things for 2 weeks, and she understood by now how he looked when he was carrying something he could not put down. "I am sorry," he said finally. "I did not understand what you were carrying." She thought about that. "You understand it now," she said. "It does not change anything." "No," he agreed. "It does not." She heard him cross the room. He came to stand beside her at the window, and he looked at the mountains, and she looked at the mountains, and the light went slowly out of the sky while neither of them spoke. She did not take a title. She did not stand at the head of his table. She did not perform royalty for people who had spent years deciding what she owed them. She stood at a window with a man who had read the full weight of what she was and had come to stand next to her anyway. Not in front of her, not behind her. Next to her. That was the whole story. It was not a small one.